Right. This video covers the famous case of Brown versus the Board of Education. So this is a case from 1954. It's one that I think you're already familiar with, and obviously has a super high degree of like influence on the country. This was a case in which this student pictured Linda Brown was attempting to go to her neighborhood elementary school. It was right down the street in Topeka, Kansas. And she was denied entry into that school because it was reserved exclusively for white students. So she was forced to be bused a pretty sizable distance across town to a school that had considerably inferior resources. The Brown family, with the backing of the NAACP, filed a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of segregation based on race within public schools in the United States. Because we're talking about a discrimination oriented case, this is 14th Amendment, and it's definitely involving the Equal Protection Clause. The case on behalf of Brown before the Supreme Court was argued partially by Thurgood Marshall, who's a lawyer working for the NAACP, who would eventually become the first African American member of the Supreme Court himself. The Supreme Court ruled unanimously in favor of yes, segregation in schools was discriminatory and unconstitutional, and basically putting an end to segregation in public schools across the United States. It's interesting if you actually read the majority opinion of the Supreme Court, they don't really focus a whole lot in their decision on the inequitable or unequal resources between white schools and African American schools. Maybe the thinking behind that is that had they ruled that segregation was unconstitutional because of the sort of unequal amount of resources in each school, you could remedy that by just providing relatively equal resources in each school, and still sort of then continue to segregate. So the Supreme Court's sort of majority opinion really focuses on the damaging psychological impact that segregation had on African American students, sort of filling them with a sense of like inferiority, and that's largely what the opinion is based on. It's also important to note that it takes a really long time for integration to occur. It's not like an instantaneous integration. Some states were very slow to integrate, required the United States government to get involved yet again. And this only applies to ending segregation in public schools. Won't be until the 1964 Civil Rights Act is passed a decade later that segregation is ended in other areas of American society.